morning was very hectic and stressful. We got ready, and I was nervous about how this was all going to go. And I took a moment to step outside on the balcony of Grandpa's house and reread what I had written. And it was very still and calm, and I could see an eagle circling above. I took that as a sign that everything was going to be okay, and that he's with us as we go through this today. Thank you all for being here, friends, family, members of the church, distinguished veterans. This many people showing up is really a testament to just how many lives Cecil Bravery touched. It's impossible to sum up a life as full of his in just a few minutes. But if I had to describe my grandfather in just 2 words, it would be a humble hero. He was a man who did extraordinary things and never once sought credit. He let his life speak for itself, through service, through work, and through the love he gave to all of us. He was more than just a good man. He was more than just a great person. He was also really freaking cool. Yeah. And as we noted, an American badass. Sorry. Everyone knows about the SR-71. Everybody knows just how cool it was to put on that spacesuit and fly at heights and speeds that most people could never even dream of. My grandfather was born in January 1935 in Warsaw, Illinois. He grew up on a farm just outside of town. No indoor plumbing, just hard work and long days. That upbringing shaped who he was, a man who never shied away from a task, who valued grit and responsibility over comfort and convenience. Those early years laid a foundation of humility and work ethic that carried him throughout his life. He worked at his brother's service station before learning about the Air Force Aviation Cadet Program from a friend who, funny enough, had failed the entrance exam. That chance conversation and my grandfather's quiet confidence changed his life, and in many ways, the lives of everybody else in this room. Cecil believed in God and fate, and that belief guided him. In the Air Force, he quickly found both purpose and partnership marrying my grandmother, Maureen. Together they raised 5 children, including 3 daughters born in back-to-back Septembers, which, depending on who you ask, was either a miracle or a scheduling nightmare. He loved his children, Teresa, Cecilia, Patricia, Marianne, and Bob. His grandchildren, Domenico, Alessandro, and me. His great-grandchildren, Indiana, Scarlett, Keely, and Charlotte, and his extended family everywhere. His military career took him all over the world, from Nebraska and Arkansas to Northern California, the Mojave Desert, Virginia, and even time abroad in Okinawa, Japan. He served in many roles, including as a navigator on the B-57 and the supersonic B-58. But his proudest aviation achievement came in the 1960s, when he became the first volunteer for the legendary SR-71 Blackbird program. As a reconnaissance systems officer, he flew daring missions over North Vietnam, Laos, Cambodia, and North Korea. He called it the best job he ever had. For his service, he received numerous honors, including the Air Medal and the Distinguished Flying Cross. He actually volunteered for the SR-71 sight unseen, knowing that it was only a top-secret mission that no one could talk about. But he embraced that sense of fate. He signed up without hesitation, and at Mach 3, he became one of only a handful of people, even to this day, to ever fly more than 3 times the speed of sound. I'm sure he's logged more hours at Area 51 than I have at Costco, but I could never get him to tell me where the aliens are. He never really bragged about anything. When I once asked him why he had been awarded the Distinguished Flying Cross, he just smiled and said, "That's classified." When I pressed, he just shrugged and said, "It was for average, everyday heroism." And that's when I realized he really was a humble hero. During his SR-71 days, he routinely flew at Mach 3.3. That's nearly 42 miles per minute. At that speed, you can fly from Seattle to Portland in under 4 minutes, faster than it takes to go through a Starbucks drive-thru. And that's really cool. On one training flight, he connected with a refueling tanker 700 miles off the coast of California. After refueling, the tanker headed back to California, but the SR-71 went to Florida and landed before the tanker made it back to California. On another flight, he and his pilot flew from Edwards Air Force Base in California to Denver. By the time they reached Colorado, the sun had set. But as they came back to Edwards, they saw the sun rise again in the west. They had literally outraced the sun. And he told that story because he found profound beauty and wonder in all of God's creations. Racing the sun was a gift that he was given, but one that he didn't take for granted. Until next time you see the sunrise or the sunset, think of Cecil and think about all of the beauty that we get to experience in the world. After retiring from the Air Force in 1979, he brought that same dedication and intellect to his second career in defense work at Hughes and Boeing. He helped shape radar and navigation systems for the B-1 and B-2 bombers and played a key role in the next generation of military aviation. Excuse me. One of my favorite stories, and one I didn't hear until much later in life, involved a pitch meeting with some military brass. A skeptical officer questioned whether the military could truly train the next generation to handle such advanced technology. And my grandfather, without missing a beat, pointed to the video games that I was already playing as a child and said, "We don't have to worry, they're already training themselves." He was always thinking steps ahead. Cecil retired from Boeing in 1999, and soon after, he and Maureen fulfilled a lifelong dream by building a house atop Smoke Bay in Anacortes. That house, perched on a hill where he could watch the eagles soar, was their happy place. And whether it was playing bocce ball in the yard, or admiring the Rock Ness Monster, or walking down to the water, visiting Grandpa's house was always so cool. They loved to entertain, always making sure that everyone had a seat, their favorite drink, and the best food around. But all the medals, the titles, the accolades, and the beautiful home, that only tell part of the story. To me, he was Grandpa, and in many ways, a father. I was lucky not just to know him, but to genuinely learn from him. I got to spend countless hours with him growing up. The age gap between my grandfather and me is actually less than the age gap between me and my youngest daughter, Charlotte. And I think about that a lot whenever I feel too tired or too old to keep up with that little Spitfire. I think if he could do it, so can I. I am eternally grateful that he didn't just meet my children, but he got to know his great-grandchildren. That is a rare and wonderful gift. He had a deep love for woodworking, and as anyone who saw it knows, he had an incredible workshop filled with tools that would impress Bob Vila. When I was a broke young adult, he helped me build furniture, tables, chairs, and end tables. But what he was really giving me was his time, patience, craftsmanship, lessons passed down while sanding and staining. He taught me that necessity is the mother of invention, that no problem is too big to solve, and that if you don't have the right tool, you just have to invent one. He invented tools for all kinds of tasks, and was even featured in a woodworking magazine for one of his creations. He also loved yard work and gardening, and never shied away from hard labor, which, when I was a teen, seemed like punishment. But I spent countless hours helping him split wood, build fences, and do chores. He could always outwork me. When someone from our church needed help, he volunteered us. At the time, I thought I was being dragged along, but now I realize it was his quiet way of teaching and loving. He loved the outdoors: fishing, hunting, gardening, boating, crabbing, hiking, and backpacking. He passed along the love of the outdoors to me, though I admit I prefer to hike to a restaurant than shoot or catch my own dinner. He was fiercely pro-life, and I think that's because he knew just how special our time here is. A few years ago, he penned an essay called "Why Me Now?" He wrote, going back just 10 generations, you would find 1,024 people as my direct ancestors. Deleting any one of them would preclude me from ever being born. He went on to conclude, it's mathematically incomprehensible for you or me to exist at all. Existential dread aside, I think that perspective helped him to understand that every person is precious, every soul is sacred, and every day should be celebrated. He had strong convictions, but he never imposed them. He wanted me to find my own way. He taught me to look at every side of an issue, to question things deeply, and to ask big questions about hard things in life, but also ask questions about the not so big things, like why do we drive on a park on a driveway? Why do our feet smell and our nose run? He could tackle serious topics head on, but he always made room for curiosity, irony, and a good laugh. And stories. He was a world-class storyteller. At every family gathering, he would hold court after dinner, story after story, some told dozens of times, but we never tired of it. He was deeply devoted to his country, his faith, and his family. I recall a time when my grandmother was in the hospital, nearing her final battle with cancer. I asked Cecil how he stayed so strong for her. He didn't hesitate. He said, that was the vow I made to her when we got married. No grand speech, no fanfare, just a promise honored to the end. In 2013, he found happiness again when he married Shirley P40. He called their time together his bonus round, a joyful, fulfilling chapter filled with laughter and light. We loved adding Shirley to our family, and it was clear how much they loved and admired each other. Their travels and adventure gave them both so much joy. Together, they made the days sunnier with joy, patience, and love. And we are so grateful she brings her heart and spirit of determination into everything she does.
Yes.
In his final years, Parkinson's took its toll, robbing him of his mobility and his voice. For someone who carried such a presence, that was hard. But the wit never left. One Thanksgiving, after dinner, we were watching football. The picture came on the screen of Ben Roethlisberger, whose last name is famously a mouthful. Shirley asked, how do you think you pronounce that name? My grandfather, voice soft, smile intact, said, I think it's Ben. He was sharp, funny, dry-witted, a master of the dad joke long before it was cool. I'm proud to say I've inherited that and I'm passing it along to the next generation, one eye roll at a time. When he was diagnosed with Parkinson's, he stayed positive. He once told a reporter, I have had a good life. It would be inappropriate for me to be ungrateful. That humility and that grace is something I will carry with me forever. One of my proudest moments with him came about 10 years ago when I was student teaching at a high school. We were on the subject of the Cold War. I asked him to come speak, not simply because he lived through the era, but because he was a big part of it, from the Cuban Missile Crisis to North Vietnam to North Korea. He hesitated at first. He was worried that his voice wouldn't carry him, but I got the students to gather close and give him their full attention. And for 4 hours, this man who once flew spy machines over enemy territory, who held a room full of teenagers in rapt attention. He was exhausted by the end, but it was rewarding for both of us. He was a real-life hero, and that day, my students got to see what I always saw. As a kid, I used to lie upside down on my grandparents' couch, staring at the wall of photos. There he was, in uniform and in spacesuits, in cockpits and places that I could only imagine, doing things saved only for the movies. He looked like an astronaut. He was my astronaut. Among those photos, I have a poem. I read it so often, I memorized it. Today, those words feel especially fitting. Because while we say goodbye to our humble hero, we remember that he once danced the skies, higher than any eagle ever dreamed of soaring. Oh, I have slipped the surly bonds of earth and danced the skies with laughter-silvered wings, put out my hand and touched the face of God. And so today we say goodbye to a man who outworked us all, outwitted us all, and quietly, gracefully soared above us all.